This is the agenda for tonight's training on Votebuilder 102, which is all about phone banking. A quick introduction to phone banking, then we'll talk about creating your call list using a virtual phone bank, and I'll share some additional resources along the way. I will show you slides with screenshots of how to do all of these skills. Then if we have time at the end, I will do a live demo and do some Q&A there. If you think after that preamble that maybe this isn't the right place for you, you are not already a Vote Builder administrator, and you're interested in volunteering in other ways, that's information on canvassing with us, phone banking, and then other training sessions. Those are the links I just dropped in the chat. So I'm going to start off by asking you all a question. What is a phone bank and why do we do it? If you want to type in the chat or if you want to raise your Zoom hand, we've got a manageable size group right now. Or I can call on somebody. There we go. Energize people to participate or get engaged politically. Yeah. Thank you for that, Greta. So what I'm going to share here is that, we talk about canvassing a lot, door knocking, and canvassing is the most effective way to engage voters. And after that, it's really about making some phone calls here. So we use phone banks to do three kind of things. And Christian, thank you. You just kind of said the same thing in the chat here for various reasons. I think about phone banking for identifying our supporters, persuading people who are undecided or independent-minded voters. And third, get out the vote, GOTV. Once we know who our supporters are and people can go to their polling locations, we use phone banking to get those supporters to cast their ballot. A benefit of phone banking is that it can be a more accessible option for some volunteers, people who have physical limitations that mean door knocking is not for them. Phone banking is a good option for those volunteers. With door knocking, you're usually maybe casting a little bit of a wider net in a physical area for efficiency's sake. You can make a phone bank that is really much more targeted for whatever particular purpose. And I'll talk through some examples. So that's one of the benefits of phone banks. And then all of this work we're doing all of the time is always helping us improve the quality, the accuracy of the data that we have. And phone banks are a big part of that. So the phone numbers that we have in Votebuilder, where do they come from? There are three main sources. The biggest chunk of the phone number data does come from the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and some vendors that are used to connect people with their phone numbers. That is a big source of that information. We also get phone number information from the Board of Elections. So if you fill out a voter registration drive and you put your phone number there, that makes its way into Votebuilder. And then the third chunk here is really the users of Votebuilder. So all of you, me, Harmon, volunteers. We are also always contributing to the numbers, in particular, improving the quality and making corrections as we go. The voter file is really extremely valuable. It's a strategic asset. But the information that we have from the Board of Elections really only gets us so far. It's all of the other work that we layer on top of that that really helps us get good phone numbers so that we can call voters. So that was a quick introduction to phone banking. I'm going to talk about creating call lists next, but I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions. So what questions do you have? If you want to type something in the chat, raise your Zoom hand, feel free. Okay, I'll keep moving if there aren't any questions. Ah, sorry, Betsy. Yeah, I've got the same Zoom link for the whole Vote Builder series. Okay, creating your call list. Now, I've got this slide up here. If you are comfortable multi-screening, you might want to try that now. If you are watching this later on video, or if you're following along with the slides later, this is a good point for you to log into Vote Builder and try some of these skills as we go along. You will, of course, use your Action ID to log into Vote Builder, and I recommend that you bookmark the address that you use. These are my standard tips for working with Vote Builder. Vote Builder is very powerful, it's very robust. I don't find it super intuitive, and it took me a while to get the hang of it. So I talk about patience, practice, and experimentation. It does take more than an hour to learn Vote Builder. I've been using Vote Builder for 6 years or something, and I'm still learning new things all the time. The more you use it, I should say, the more I use it, the faster and easier I find it to be. So there are some tasks that I do on a regular basis that I can kind of just fly through at this point. But when I'm trying something new, it does take me a little while to figure it out and get smooth at that process. There's also more than one way to do things within Vote Builder. I'm going to show you a method. I'm going to show you the method I use, but you might have a different method. Hardman might do something a little bit different than I do. When it comes to experimentation, I learn a lot on Vote Builder by just trying things. I know what I'm trying to get to, and I'll fiddle with the data until I feel like I've solved that question. What I want to tell you is that you pretty much can't break Vote Builder. So it is okay to experiment, to try new things and see where that gets you. Okay, building a contact list for a phone bank. We've got a couple steps here. So, first is think about who you are contacting and use the relevant criteria. The first question is probably going to be, are you contacting voters? In which case, you will use the My Voters portion of Vote Builder. Or are you making a phone bank to contact volunteers? In which case, you would use My Campaign. This time of the year, you might be making a phone bank of volunteers to invite them to your 4th of July picnic. You might be making a phone bank list from My Campaign. Most of the time, you're probably making a list in My Voters of voters themselves. So once you know if you want to be in My Voter or My Campaign, depending on who you want to contact, this is what the screen looks like to create a list. So on the left-hand side, I've got a big red arrow pointing at the button that says create a list. And then it pulls up this screen here that says create a new search. This is where you will add the criteria to narrow your list. We talked in more detail last week in Vote Builder One-on-One on how to create a list. So I'm not going to go into full detail here about that, but add the criteria to narrow the list to the people you want to talk to. Some specific guidance for creating a list for phone banks. I recommend you narrow your list to voters who have a phone number and exclude people who have asked to be put on the do not call list. So once you have your list, let's say I'm making a list of um, Democrats in my precinct because I'm going to invite them to an event. I might then add this step to narrow to people who have a phone number. So phones is one of the data points. And you can see here that there are quite a few options. I usually just hit check all to get all of the people who do have a phone number. And then if people have asked to be put on the do not call list, you would go to the criteria for suppressions. And there is a drop down here that you can choose between exclude do not call, um, include do not call, or you could, for some reason, pull a list do not call people only. You wouldn't do that to make a phone bank, but those are your options. So I recommend strongly, when you're making your phone bank, make sure you are excluding people who have asked to be excluded. Step three, remove anyone who's been contacted recently. This can improve the quality of your conversations. In particular, this is important as you are building phone banks to call voters. Now, there is a Canvas status option menu of criteria that you can select. And if you click exclude in the drop-down menu there, it's going to automatically select the most common exclusions. And I will walk through this live when I do a screen share here in a little bit, because you might want to edit some of those. But let's say you are calling voters to tell them about your municipal candidates for the 2025 election. You probably don't need to call people who you had contact with on the doors in the past few weeks, for example. So how much time you exclude people, what date range you set for this exclusion depends on the strategy and what you're trying to accomplish for your phone bank. When it gets to be October 31st, you probably want to call people more frequently. So then you might say, don't call people today that I spoke to yesterday. But right now, you might say, any voter I've talked to so far this year, I maybe don't need to talk to them again. When you have your criteria the way you want it, then you can hit the green button that says Run Search. So at a high level, those are the three steps. So think about the criteria to pull your list, narrow it to people who have phone numbers and take off people who are on the do not call list, and then consider removing people who have been contacted recently. Once you hit Run Search, this is the screen it will give you with the list you just created. The next step is to save this list. So I've got the red arrow pointing to the button that says Save List As. And then you have two options. You can save this as a saved list or a saved search. A saved list doesn't change. So the people who are on that list will always be on that list. A saved search will update based on people falling in and out of the criteria you set. So for example, if you said, I don't want to call anybody we've spoken to in the past month, if somebody is contacted, they would drop off the list if you saved it as a search. I mostly use saved lists myself, but I know a lot of people like the saved search feature. I do want to strongly recommend that when you save your list, whether you save it as a list or a search, consider setting naming conventions. If you have been working in Votebuilder before, you might have seen there's a long list and you can't tell what things are. This is why I like to set a naming convention so that I can remember what in the world I was doing. So as an example, I tend to name all of my lists by the year, the geography, and the purpose. So this screenshot here says 2024 Holly Springs, which is my town, and then it says persuasion, because I was pulling a list of people I was making persuasion phone calls to. I really recommend you come up with a naming convention that's going to work for you. I also tend to put notes in the description field so that I can remember what I was doing. It's a long time from now until November, and it's a real long time from now until November 2026. I'm going to forget why I created lists. So these naming conventions help me remember. Okay, that was information on creating a list specifically for a phone bank. Next, I'll talk about how to take that list and turn it into a virtual phone bank. But I'm going to pause and see if there are questions. So Betsy's question, what's the advantage of saving as a list versus saving as a search? I know I have my bias based on my purposes. Harmon, what are your thoughts on saving as a list versus a search?
Yeah, so if you plan to use that list, I'll phrase it like that, as that if you plan to use that search in the future, you want it as a search. Because what happens is, and I'll give you a really good example. So you just want to do a list. This is a one and done. You're just making a phone bank. Usually you want to do lists, like Christy's suggesting. But say you wanted it to be a little bit more, if you wanted this to be a little bit more complex than that, like say, for example, you wanted to call this list every single week, and you wanted it to just naturally remove anyone that you have talked to in the last week. You save it as a search with a remove step, contact anybody who I talked to in the last week. And that way, when you rerun that search a week from now, everybody you had already talked to is gone from that new phone bank you would make. And so that's the merits of doing a search. It's really just it's a more complex tool for a more complex problem. And usually, especially on the county level, you just need to make a phone bank. It's a one and done thing to kind of get out there. But if you do plan to do this a lot more regularly, it might be worth looking into making it a search.
Yeah, when I'm pulling lists for phone banks, it's usually I'm going to call make confirmation calls for people who are scheduled to attend a session, or call people afterwards. And so it's really a finite amount of time it'll be relevant. So that's why I tend to use a lot of lists. Can a saved list become a saved search at a time in the future? If you loaded your list to my list, then you could save it as a search. So, yes, or you can just keep making lists. I find lists just like one step simpler. So, that's one of the reasons I use lists all the time. If you're saving it as a search, you might want to make extra sure in the description you're adding information about what your criteria was so that you remember. Jacob, I see your hands up.
Hi, I missed the last week, so this is my first week here. I'm glad this is happening. So my question is, if you do a safe search and you're excluding people like you've contacted in the last month, and then you get to like 31 days, are those people automatically removed or added to the list depending on that criteria? Like as time is going on, does that exclusionary get applied?
Um, I think what I heard you ask is if you have a time limit on it, kind of how often is it updated? Like if you've got that time limit, yeah, people will be coming off. How you Herman, would that automatically update a VPB, or do you have to like hit run search again?
So if you're talking about the list itself, I'm sorry, the search is just as updated as whenever you last ran the search,
Hmm.
or whenever you last used the search to make a VPB. It's wherever you pulled it from, basically. Um, Searches by themselves, if you go into a folder, don't even technically show you like how many people are in it. You have to run it to do that. And so you'd have to basically run it just before making it as a VPB for it to show up. So it'll be as recent as you make that VPB is how I would explain that. If you're talking more about VPBs, there's a way that you can extend a VPB to be for more like you set the timeline of when a VPB, a virtual phone bank, is active. And so you could just make it expire at a certain point if that's what you're asking, or you could extend it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. With that transition, let's talk about using virtual phone banks. So the acronym we say is VPB. So this is a phone bank, a paperless. So if you phone banked, I don't know, I don't know how long we've been using it this way, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you might have had a piece of paper and a clipboard and a pen, and you had to punch in the number and take notes, and then someone had to do data entry. So VPB is the paperless system. So your callers view the information on a computer screen or a tablet, enter information on the conversation they're having as they go along. So what I'm going to do is walk through setting up a virtual phone bank, a VPB, once you have a list. So this is a screenshot on the left from the list I created. and you can see the telephone icon that says calls. I've got a red box around it. When you click on that, it will give you this screen on the right. It's a little small to see, but it's asking you if you want to set up a virtual phone bank. Select that and hit next. Then you do have the option to set some preferences, some settings for your virtual phone bank. There are a lot of options. These four things are really what's required. So you need to give it a name. Again, I'm going to recommend using some type of naming convention. I often use the exact same name I used for the list if it's I'm calling just for that list. You will select a script. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And this will give your callers, their opening lines and the questions that you're going to have them ask the person they're calling. To be considered a script, it does need to have at least one survey question. So I will show you I think I'm going to show you like what that looks like here in a second. A start and end date. So you probably want your phone banks to end at one point. This is what I think Harmon was referring to, that you can extend it if you need to. Like I said, I'm usually doing confirmation calls for events or something. So my end date is like once the event's over, I don't need the phone bank anymore. But if you're working on a campaign, you might say, it's going to take us a month to get through this phone bank. So let me set the end date for a month from now. And then there is a button to publish to openvpb.com. That is where your callers will go so that they can see the information. So this is what that screen looks like. You can see I gave it a name. I used my same naming convention. I used the year, date, and gave it a title, put some information in the description, chose my script. So there's a drop down menu here where the arrow is coming towards the bottom, default script. You can also preview that script with the blue button there that says view script, and then set your date range, the start date and the end date. You have a bunch of options here that you can control about what level of information you show on your virtual phone bank to your volunteers, what kind of information they can collect. For example, I like to add the field so if someone gets an updated email or phone number, they can enter it in there. There is also this option for a progress bar. I don't think it works. I would ignore it. I wish it worked because then it would say like you're 50% through your phone list. I've never gotten it to work. So I ignore that. Okay, so here I am on the screen. I've got my name for my phone bank, my description, I've got my script set. And on the right-hand side, I've got these green brackets around the URL. This is the web address that you would send people so that they could join your virtual phone bank. And I will do a screen share here in a minute and show you what that looks like. That's how to take your list and turn it into a phone bank. Let me share some additional information, and then I'm going to jump to a screen sharing. Harmon, there's some links for you to drop as we go along here in the notes section of the slides. There is what's called the Living Library. This is basically a shared drive. It was created several years ago, and I've been adding to it at time. So there are the slide decks for these training materials are in there, the user agreement, the Votebuilder guide, all of that is in this Living Library folder. And the Votebuilder guide, what I recommend you do with this, it's like a, I don't know, 60-page document with all the technical stuff about Votebuilder. Bookmark it or something, and then you could search for key terms when questions come up. I will admit that it has not been updated. I didn't get a chance to update it last year, but it is still really helpful information there. not Vote Builder related, but if you are not yet subscribing to the content package, I encourage you to. This is an email that comes out once a week from our digital and communications teams. If you've ever thought, like, I wish I knew what the Democratic talking points were, or why aren't Democrats better at messaging? Subscribe to this, and then you'll be on the same page as us in terms of the main issues going on in North Carolina politics and how we're talking about them. This is the second of this six-part Vote Builder training series. And next week is canvassing. So how to pull a list in Vote Builder and then turn it into a canvas in Minivan. I'm recording them all and also posting them on YouTube. And then Harmon is going to start hosting, and I've put links in the chat. I will also include it in the follow-up email, but Harmon is going to start hosting Vote Builder practice sessions. The first one, it looks like, is tomorrow, going to be every other Wednesday at 6:30. And you can fill out that form to get the information. Harmon, anything else you want to say about the practice sessions?
Yeah, they're exactly how they're described. They're meant to be practice sessions. Well, this does intersect a little bit with training sessions. Ultimately, what we want you to have is to have gone through these trainings first, and then that's for us to review, say, cutting turf or a list you made for phone banking. And then we take a look at it and give you feedback on that.
Thank you, Harmon. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to do a live demo. So give me one moment.